Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar, Overcoming Climate Challenges for People with Disabilities, Available Policies and Services, hosted by Uniting the Central Coast for Action, a program of the Slow Climate Coalition. I'm John Spigelski. I lead the United Central Coast for Action program. We deeply appreciate the support of our partner organizations which help promote this webinar. We continue to work with our partners and with you and our audience to further our transition to clean energy and develop resilience in our communities. We are excited to bring you today's program, Overcoming Climate Challenges for People with Disabilities. We have excellent presenters who will help guide you through this very important topic. We will be recording this webinar. A copy will be sent to all registered. We'll have a Q&A session after each presentation and at the conclusion of the program. During the presentations, please enter your questions into the Q&A feature. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's webinar, Jenn Chassman Browne. Jenn is the founder of New Ground Educational Consulting. She has lived with rheumatoid arthritis since she was 6 years old and uses her lived experience in her work as a disability advocate and educator. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. I'm so glad to be here today and appreciate all of you joining us. We have three speakers today, three panelists, and I'm going to introduce each one as they speak. And then after each panelist, we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions in the Q&A or the chat, and we will go from there. So our first speaker is Bradlee Kirkman. Bradlee is the Emergency Preparedness Service Manager for Access Central Coast, a private nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing disability rights and to supporting independence for individuals throughout Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo counties. So I'm going to hand it over to Bradlee.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. As I said, my name is Bradlee Kirkman, and I am the Emergency Preparedness Services Manager for Access Central Coast. I got a little presentation here for us all. I'm going to be talking just a couple minutes. I want to start off, just tell you about who our organization is, and then we'll kind of get into the climate change and a disaster once you know who I am. So let me share. Let me redo that. All right. Do you see everyone see that? See that, Jennifer?
Yes, looks great.
Excellent. Perfect. All right. Like I said, I am with Access Central Coast. We are a nonprofit. We are a disability services nonprofit organization with a mission to inspire independence, advance accessibility, and foster equity for people with disabilities. How I'd like to describe it, if there is something preventing you from living your best life and you don't know how to go around that barrier, give us a call. Maybe we have dealt with that situation before and we can help you remove that barrier. We are also an aging and disability resource center. DRCs, we provide long-term services and support to both older adults and people with disabilities who want to live independently in their community. Our organization is unique. Currently, 82% of our staff and board are individuals with disabilities. So we can offer kind of a little more unique insight with personal experiences in helping and supporting you as well. Our geographic area, don't worry, I'm not going to read all this. We just wanted to let you know we cover from Santa Barbara, Ventura, and San Luis Obispo counties. That's our catchment area. Every county in America is going to have a independent living center associated with it, and ours cover those three counties. Eligibility. If you having a disability diagnosed or self-identified or being an older adult is the only criteria. You just have to self-identify. We do not require proof. We just believe you. So real quickly, I want to go over a couple of our services that we offer at Access Central Coast. Just going to read them. Assistive technologies, housing navigation, benefits and counseling, personal assistant connection, emergency preparedness, which we're doing today, interpreter registry, blind and low vision services, youth services, Cal AIM. The one program I do like to talk about really briefly is our transitions program, because it can affect anyone. If you find yourself or a loved one in a hospital for an extended stay or a skilled nursing facility and you want to get back home, they'll provide a social worker, but once you're gone, they kind of leave you hanging. We will actually follow you from the skilled nursing facility hospital to your home for 30 days. It's an amazing program. Everyone could probably use it at some point in their life. So I'd like everyone to know about it. Now, lastly, we have quite a few peer groups. Chat Space, which I think is on a pause. We have Santa Barbara peer groups, and then each county we have blind low vision peer support groups. So that's just kind of a little overview of some of the things we have. If those are any of those services or supports you feel like, oh man, that could benefit me, please give me a call. I'm going to have all our information at the end. But we're Access Central Coast. We're Googleable. All right, on to climate change and preparedness. This is a hard fact. Climate change and disasters affect older adults and people with disabilities extremely, extremely disproportionately. Heavy fact coming here. When there's an evacuation and people have to get out of disaster, well over 50%, the people that die are people with disabilities and aging adults. Hard fact. And we want that to not happen. So that's what we're kind of discussing today. So some of the services that we have here at Access Central Coast to help make that horrible fact not happen someday. We have an emergency preparedness program. So just briefly, I'm going to go over some of the emergency preparedness services we have here at Access Central Coast. And you'll be working directly with me if you utilize any of our services, which I hope you do. We offer emergency plans. We partner with PG&E and their public safety power shutoff programs, as well as a few other programs that they have, such as medical baseline. And then community presentations, what I'm doing now. I love getting out in the community, spreading the message, and hopefully helping people learn about disaster preparedness. So we're going to break those down a little bit more, and then if we have any questions at the end. So disaster plans. The way I like to look and help people approach disaster plans is we are approaching it with the lens of someone with limited mobility. So that's how I like to look at it. And we're going to be looking at a plan, how it is going to affect you. Something that probably a lot of people have heard of is you got to have a grab and go bag. The county says, hey, disaster's coming, you got to get out of here, grab your stuff and go. I'm sorry, if you are a person that needs a little more time to get ready and just have a little more limited mobility, there is no such thing as a grab and go. It does not exist. So I want to help you look at all the things that are affecting you and all of the needs that you have, and help identify how a plan is going to work for you, a very person-centered disaster plan. We're going to look at the alerts that are available for the disaster alerts that are available on the counties. Help you get signed up for those. So I believe this is San Luis Obispo County. San Luis Obispo County is fortunate. You have one of the only actual fully comprehensive evacuation plans for people with limited mobility in the country. Literally one of the only ones in the country. Counties don't want registries. They don't have the means to have that because the power plant, SLO County actually has the funds to have a proper evacuation plan. But on that, I would sign up for it, but I would still plan as if the county doesn't have it. A lot of information on that. Definitely something I want to discuss with you one-on-one, something that you have to figure out on your own. But the way we do that is I would like everyone to identify 5 allies who can actually support you in getting the things you need to either get to a shelter or get to the place that you need to go. So we call that the 5 allies, and we have you look at who lives close to you. Are your neighbors able to help? Do you have family, friends? Do you have support staff? Have you asked your support staff? Are they contractually obligated to stay with you if they're in a disaster? We are going to look at all those things in our disaster planning. Shelters. Shelters are a great option. I know that doesn't sound most exciting if there's a disaster and then you're forced to kind of go into a large building with a bunch of people. Doesn't sound awesome, but I promise you, it is a great, great option. It is the hub for your community if your community is in a disaster. And we'll talk about that on why I think that's a great option and all the benefits that are available to you if you realize you're a person that has to go to a shelter. I'm going to a shelter. I know that's where I'm going if there's a disaster in my community. And then disaster supplies. Figured out the items that you need, and whether you are going to shelter or if you are, it's a stay order. You have to stay in your home. Figuring out how you're going to get those supports and figuring out how you're going to get the supplies, or having those supplies on hand that you need. So we're going to look at all that. Figure out your personalized disaster plan. Um, Public safety power shutoffs. Like I said, we are partnership with PG&E, and something that they unfortunately have to do is they have to cut off power to high fire areas that have power lines going through them. So really windy, hot days, there might be a declared public safety shutoff, and they're going to turn off power in a certain location. Well, if you're a person that has medical equipment that plugs into the wall, obviously that's not an option for you. So PG&E has created a couple programs for that. One is a backup battery program. She'll talk about that a little more. But the one that I really like is there actually is a public safety power shutoff. It's never a surprise. These are always forecasted, and then you're actually able to get into a hotel. PG&E will actually put you in a hotel if you're in the forecasted area of a public safety power shutoff. Once again, that's something you kind of need to plan for, not something that's done on a whim, but it's something we can plan for and look to do if that is something that you are affected by in public safety power shutoffs. If To be eligible for those programs, you have to have durable medical equipment that plugs into the wall, and then obviously live in a PSPS area. Other programs, the battery backup. If you have kind of low power, and another option instead of going to a hotel is PG&E will provide you with a backup battery. You want to sign up for that before the disaster begins, and I can help you sign up for that program. There's also a few money saving programs, the care and fair programs. Those are low income. Medical baseline, that's just if you have medical equipment that plugs in the wall. It doesn't matter how much money you make on that. You can be rich as rich can be, and you still qualify for that program. So I can help you sign up for that as well. And then lastly, community presentations like we're doing now. I love getting the message out to our community. All of my presentations are free, so and I like to do it through the lens of limited mobility. That's kind of the approach I take for all my presentations. I feel that lens covers the most amount of people that I possibly can in a presentation. And then lastly, if you're part of a civic group, clubs, faith-based communities, organizations, you feel like, hey, you know what? I think my club wants to take disaster preparedness a little more seriously. Give me a call, and like I said, I'll be more than happy to do a presentation for you. Here is all of our offices. Couple offices in each county. SLO only has one office. I'm based out of Santa Maria, but like I said, I'm the person. I cover all three counties. I'm the only emergency preparedness person for our whole catchment area. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Bradley. So if there's anybody who has questions, please drop those into the Q&A, which I will check in just a moment. I did have a question for you, and maybe this is like something that people can work with you on, but I'm wondering what you recommend that people put in their to-go bags, their grab-and-go bags, and if there's help that you can provide in putting those together for individuals.
Yeah, the first thing you need to get in your grab and go kit is your medications. 100% you need to figure out your meds. I would say first thing is to get a list together, get it on paper, what all your meds are. One of the reasons I recommend shelters is if you are unable to get your 2 week supply of medications. Yes, you heard that right. A 2 week emergency supply of medication. If you're unable to get that and you find yourself at a shelter, that's your best place that you're going to be able to get those medications because shelters work one-on-one with public health, and public health is going to have the best access to that. So that is definitely my first thing that we look at is your medications and all of your medical needs. Um, so that is what we look at as far as the person-centeredness. The rest of it, I mean, I can give you a bunch of stuff, but really, like every single list, all those lists are the same, and you really just kind of got to pick and choose and really kind of feel what is going to work best for you. And we can just kind of look at that stuff. I
Great.
also have, oh, I forgot to mention, I have starter kits. Oh, there we go. I got starter kits. These are free, and if you want one, I'd love to give you one. So we do have. I know I said no such thing as grab and go. I have starter grab and go kits for you, and I would love to give you one as well. I got a bunch of them. Just let me know.
Perfect.
Does that
Thank
kind of
you.
answer your question a little bit?
Yes, yes. And we have a question from the chat from Eric. Those of us who don't drive, epilepsy in his case,
Mhm.
who need evacuation planned for by PG&E in the event of a radioactive release, does that extend to non-Diablo events such as floods and wildfires?
Yeah, by my understanding, the county program evacuation is any disaster. I don't think it has to be PG&E related. But like I mentioned earlier, when creating your disaster plan, I think it is imperative that you look at your five allies. That is the approach that I take when supporting people with the disaster plans. Is I'm sure you've all heard it, prepare like no one's coming. I have plenty of people in the emergency world. They're like, yes, we are coming. It just might take 2 weeks. Because, sorry, you're not the priority. They're putting out fires and helping people out of the hospital. That's the priority right now. You're not the priority. So, or so do everything in your power to identify your personal supports that you have that could come and help you get to the shelter and help you in this time of need. I guarantee you have it. I'm a person that hates asking for help. I guarantee you I have 5 people that could come and help me if I need. I've worked with plenty of people that say that. I will help you find those 5 people.
Great, thank you. And then Diego asks, where can I find the county plan?
That's online. I think that's pretty easily Googleable, but give me a call. I can help you find that if you need.
Okay, awesome. Remind us of your contact information again, please.
Yes, so I'm with Access Central Coast.
Great.
It's 805-925-0015. And that's the number to my office. But you call any office so you can get to me.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your contributions, Bradlee.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We're going to go on ahead to Vicky, who is our second presenter. Vicky Ballmes is the Regional Mass Care Manager for the American Red Cross Central Coast region. She focuses on programs such as sheltering, feeding, distribution of emergency supplies, and reunification. She deploys to disasters of all sizes and kinds, both locally and around the country. And Vicky recently celebrated 30 years of service with the American Red Cross, 22 years as a volunteer, and 8 years as an employee. So welcome, Vicky.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm going to share my presentation. My name is Vicky Ballmes, and I am the Regional Mass Care Manager for the Central California region of the American Red Cross. I'm here to talk about how the Red Cross can support clients with disabilities and other access and functional needs during a disaster. So just a quick agenda of what I will be discussing today. We'll talk about why we're discussing this, why we're talking about climate change, disasters, and various types of vulnerable populations and their needs during an evacuation or disaster. We'll talk about, for evacuations, where do you get information about evacuations, both warnings and orders, and also where to go, what are the possibilities. I'll give you some shelter packing suggestions, just from my experience of working in, living in, sleeping in, surviving various shelters over the years, just kind of suggestions for you to bring if you are specifically packing to go to a shelter. And then I'm going to talk to you about disaster disability integration and disaster health services, which are our two programs in the Red Cross in the disaster cycle services that help clients both individually and kind of programmatically make sure that they have what they need to thrive. And so health services is really, I'll get into this more in a minute, but they're about meeting these kind of individual needs of our clients. And then disability integration is more of the bigger picture, the access, physical, programmatic, language, things like that, making sure that everybody's needs are met. So to start off, let me move this. Why are we talking about this? Why was I asked to speak about this topic? And you already heard from Bradlee talking a bit about how people with disabilities and other access and functional needs are disproportionately affected by disasters, by climate change, by the changes that we've seen over the past, especially 10 years, but even longer than that, of course. And what we've seen is a significant increase in the number and the severity of disasters over this last 10 years, due in large part to climate change. So we've seen larger disasters, more of them. They are also more destructive and much more deadly as well. And again, people with disabilities and other access and functional needs are those who are disproportionately affected. They are significantly more likely to be affected by these disasters and have the effects last longer, and also more likely to unfortunately die also, or be severely injured. And so it's important that we kind of plan ahead and make sure that people know how to take care of themselves and what kind of support they can get during during disasters, during evacuations. So that's what we'll be talking about today. So in addition to these larger, more destructive, more deadly, and more frequent disasters, again, because of climate change, we're seeing expanded populations in areas that are under threat. We're seeing more urban areas be affected by disasters. And also in general, just in terms of what's happening socioeconomically in especially the United States at the moment, but around the world, the populations that are vulnerable to these effects, to these disasters, to all of this negative effects of climate change, those populations are growing, and they're becoming increasingly affected by kind of the world, the economy, and so their options are being reduced as well. And just to kind of sum up, it's basically the uncommon threats are becoming more common, and more something that we have to plan for and worry about. 500-year or 100-year floods are not, they're not every 500 or 100 years now. They're more frequent. And so again, we have larger areas, we have more urban areas, more housing, more places, and especially places where people who are more economically disadvantaged or otherwise vulnerable are likely to be living. And so this is something that we need to really make sure that people are aware of in advance, their options, and what kind of resources that they can get, both ahead of time and then during the disaster as well. So just kind of this is a broad discussion about where do you get information about evacuations. This is for both evacuation warnings and orders. I would say don't wait until a warning becomes an order. Often you're not going to have a huge amount of time, and you have to keep track of what's happening. If your area is under evacuation, pack and leave as soon as you can. Right. So you can find information about those warnings and orders, about road closures, about shelter locations in a variety of places. So here's just some. I also added some specific to the coastal area, Central Cal area. So the Red Cross Emergency app is a great source of information. You can basically tell them where you live, and it gives you local weather alerts, information about threats locally. And then if there is a disaster happening, they will tell you shelter locations and locations of any other service delivery sites, like points of distribution or pod sites where we're giving out items in bulk, or things like that, or temporary evacuation points. All of that will be on the Red Cross Emergency app in one place. You should also bookmark your local city, county, state, and national emergency management websites. So for the San Luis Obispo County, it's the County Office of Emergency Services, or OES. You'll notice every county has a slightly different name for this, slightly different kind of arrangement. But this is the people who are legally responsible for getting this information out to you. So they will have a website. Santa Barbara County, it's the Office of Emergency Management. That's the county office, but every city also has some type of emergency or disaster department. So you can make sure that you are kind of linked in ahead of time. You have all of the websites of all of the different sources of information. This is the official information from your local government, who is responsible, legally responsible for your safety and welfare. So they take that very seriously. Make sure that you sign up ahead of time for any alerts, any alert systems in your area. For SLO, they have readyslo.org. And then Santa Barbara has readysbc.org. You can go there and you'll sign up to receive alerts whenever there's something that they need to tell the public about some type of emergency or disaster situation. It's very important to be ahead of time, to have those alerts signed up for ahead of time so you get them. You can choose, phone, text, email, or all of the above. They'll give you a variety of options, but make sure that you figure out what your local, especially your county alert system. The cities don't always have their own alert system, but your county will definitely have an alert system. So make sure that you look that up. You can just Google, disaster alert and your county name, and you'll figure out, or you'll be able to find that pretty easily. Another great resource is the Watch Duty app, and also they have a website as well if you prefer to be on your computer. It's a great free app. This is actually what a lot of agencies, everybody in the Red Cross uses this to keep up to date on fires. It started out as just wildfires. Now they have incorporated also floods, and I'm sure they're continually expanding what they do and the areas they cover. It was also originally just California, and now I think it's the entire country. So it's a great resource. It'll tell you what's happening as soon as a fire pops up, who's responding, how big it is, how many acreage, where they are in the process of getting it under control. And if it's a disaster where I'll tell you, there's a lot of fires that we are unaware of that they get a handle on very quickly. So you may get a lot of notifications, but the vast majority of them will not turn into something bigger, but some of them might. So if it's a larger disaster, if there are evacuations, are evacuations, there'll be a shelter, almost certainly, unless it's an area that has pretty much nobody actually living in it in an evacuation zone. But otherwise, if people are evacuated, if people are displaced, there's always a shelter set up for them to go to. So they'll have information about the location of those shelters, as well as the evacuation info, road closure info, links to get more information, things like that. It's a great resource. And for the free app, you can set up alerts for up to 4 counties. So you can do, your home county, and then if you have family somewhere else, if you want to, you can set up additional alerts. And then also, it's good to, again, find ahead of time the official social media accounts. So for example, Red Cross, they'll have both local, the Red Cross in your area will have some type of social media account. And there's also National Red Cross for kind of bigger events. And then, of course, your local, state, and national emergency management. They also have social media accounts where they give out information. This is on things like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So make sure whatever social media platforms you use, make sure you have those bookmarked, followed, so that when they put out alerts, you see them. Right, but that's a great source of information as well. And of course, your local news stations, either physically on your TV or their website, or with social media. But they also are putting out information about what's happening locally, including disasters. So if there is an evacuation, where do you go? I get this question a lot. Does everybody come to a Red Cross shelter or any shelter? No, not everybody does. Up to a point. There was a shelter once at UC Santa Barbara that I was running. This is back, I think, 2009, I want to say, where the fire happened so quickly, the evacuations, happened so quickly that people didn't have anywhere else. They didn't have time to find somewhere else to go. We ended with 900 people showing up for the overnight, and that included Rob Lowe, who lives, in the area, and ended up at the shelter himself with his family because at the end of the day, that's where you can go to be safe. You don't have to worry about finding a hotel that has vacancy or whether you can afford somewhere else to go. Red Cross or somebody will always have a shelter if people are displaced for them to go to be safe. So, but a lot of people do try to, if they find out there's an evacuation order or warning, they will go to a hotel if they can and if they can afford it and if there is availability. And especially larger disasters, the hotels fill up very quickly. And so often we'll get people at the shelter because there's literally nowhere else to go. And not to make the shelter sound like, the last resort, but it is the last resort in a sense. Like it's always there, but it's not necessarily the most comfortable living situation. So a lot of people try to find something else, which is great if you can. A lot of people stay with their friends or family. Um, and where I live in Santa Barbara. There are a lot of areas that are evacuated frequently, especially in the canyons. And so a lot of people own an RV and they use that for their evacuation plan. And so they will just drive, they will often actually drive to the shelter site. So they still need that information. And they're utilizing the shelter resources, they're eating at the shelter, they're using the showers and restrooms. And they're welcome to do so and just kind of parking in the parking lot, but they're sleeping in their RV, but using all the other kind of resources of the shelter. And that's pretty common. It's actually a growing thing that we're seeing across the country as well. And then, of course, like I said, the sort of last, not a last choice, but the last result, resort, this thing is always there, always available, is an emergency shelter. And again, these are Red Cross or run by other organizations or government entities. It's actually the responsibility, again, of the government to take care of their citizens during a disaster and take care of everybody. You don't have to be a citizen, especially at the Red Cross shelters. Everybody is welcome. As you can see, that's our motto. Everyone is welcome. We register. If you're staying on site, you have to register just for safety reasons, but we don't look at ID. We don't ask for ID. We do not care your citizenship status. We don't care anything about that everybody is welcome, regardless of who they are. The point is to have a place that is safe for everyone to go to. So again, it's actually the government's responsibility, but the Red Cross shelters people on behalf of the government, and we actually have a congressional charter to do so. We have our official agreement with the United States government that the Red Cross is the go-to organization in charge of sheltering during disasters. So we do the vast majority. Sometimes in a larger disaster, often in a larger disaster, you'll have other organizations that will set up a shelter for a day or two, like churches or social services department will set up a shelter for a few days. And then they usually, if they're not closed, if they're still needed, they are actually turned over to the Red Cross to take over because we have we have the resources, we have the knowledge, and we have the experience to run these shelters. So again, people will often try to find another location to go instead of going directly to a shelter. But I'll tell you, like I said, everybody is welcome. What we see the most at the shelters, especially from the beginning of the disaster, is the vulnerable and marginalized populations. But at a certain point, anybody may end up at a shelter. And especially if it's a larger disaster, we see this bump almost always in shelter population about 2 weeks in. So that's the time that people tend to start running out of the ability to pay for a hotel for their family, or the hotels run out of availability, or if you're staying with your friends and family, that's the point where it often gets a little too close, too cozy for comfort, maybe to put it. That people kind of get tired of the situation, that you sort of wear out your welcome. It's uncomfortable for all the people involved, and so people will then leave their friends and family and go to a shelter because it's going to be a longer term situation. They need that housing support. So the point is, it's there. It will be there. If there are people who are displaced, there will be a place for them to go, a safe place for them to go, and everybody is welcome, regardless of any aspect of your identity, including citizenship. Excuse me. So a few quick shelter packing suggestions I have for you. If you're packing and you know that you're going to a shelter, or you may end up at a shelter, I would say bring layers. It's a big kind of dorm situation. Our dormitories are often in kind of large, airy, often cold rooms. So, make sure that you have layers that you can get yourself warmer or cool, take off something to cool down if necessary. Um, you may not have any control over the heat or cooling situation. So it's better to be safe and bring layers so that you can try and keep yourself comfortable. Also, in terms of comfort, bring, if possible, a pillow in your pillowcase. I'll say you'll get as many blankets as you want from the Red Cross and pretty much every other organization, as far as I know. You're welcome to have as many blankets as you need and want. You can use multiple blankets as a pillow, but we don't give out pillows, and we don't stock pillows. So if you want an actual pillow, if you don't sleep easily, and your pillow is important to your comfort and your ability to sleep, try to bring that with you. I say again, along the layers, make sure that your clothes are comfortable. You want to make sure you have something like shower shoes, flip-flops, something like that, because this is a mass housing situation. You're going to be sharing showers with other people. You're going to have to be like walking, to and from the shower. So just make sure that you have kind of what you need. Also, your favorite toiletries. We will give you toiletries, but they're not necessarily going to be, the brands that you like and use and are comfortable with and are familiar and comforting. So if you're able to, if you're choosing between packing that and packing, the photo album, choose the photo album. But if you have the ability to, just think, that you're living in sort of a dorm situation, and so think about that when you're packing. And again, of course, make sure that you have your phone, your charger, headphones. Um, that's something that you can make sure we'll have a place for you to charge your phone, but we may not have chargers, especially at the beginning of the disaster or of a smaller disaster. So make sure that you're able to charge your devices and be able to use them. You have headphones or your earbuds or whatever you like to use. And also think about, we'll talk about it later, but the kind of noise canceling headphones are great. Again, this is a mass living situation, and so it can be very noisy sometimes, and you may be overwhelmed. So it's good, to have something that you can put on and to wear to help deal with the amount of noise and kind of activity around you. Say also, again, living in this kind of dorm situation, earplugs and an eye mask are good, especially if you are bothered by snoring. Just fair warning on that. And then getting more into kind of medical things, bring your medications, or at the very least, a list of your current medications if you aren't able to grab your actual meds. Your list of current medications, it's good to have the information about who is your prescribing doctor and the pharmacy that you usually use, and we'll talk about this more later. But at the very least, you want to know what you are currently taking and have that information with you. I would say make sure that you have that information, especially the list of current medications in your go bag or your go kit. Any durable medical equipment that you use, so eyeglasses or contact lenses, hearing aids, walkers, canes, anything that you need. If you're able to grab it and bring it with you, it'll make your life much easier. And then, of course, again, this, helping you deal with living in a dormitory type situation. Excuse me, if you have any favorite sensory items, things that help you when you're stressed out, toys, different types of sensory toys, or again, noise canceling headphones are a great idea. It's better to have them whether or not you think you'll need them. So the two programs in disaster cycle services that help our clients is what we call folks who are displaced by a disaster and are seeking services. Are disaster disability integration and disaster health services. And they work together a lot, and there's some overlap, but they kind of have different larger focuses. So disaster disability integration, or DDI, you might see it somewhere written down, focuses on these larger issues of equity and accessibility and access, basically. So they're focusing on physical access, things like doors and bathrooms, number of accessible bathrooms and showers and parking and anything related to kind of physically accessing a space, because we're using other people's spaces. We have agreements with thousands literally across the country of of spaces, churches, schools, all sorts of buildings. And so they all have different levels of accessibility. And so disaster disability integration looks at the shelter location or whatever service delivery site location and makes sure that we are making it as accessible as possible. And that includes there's a lot of problem solving in that in order to make things more accessible. Right. It's also programmatic access, making sure that everybody is able to access these various programs that are set up to help people. And that involves things like language, making sure if we need, for example, ASL, American Sign Language interpreters or translators for other languages, making sure that the population at the shelter is able to access the information that they need, making sure that all of our signage is as it comes this way. So making sure we have the signs up basically that we already have in our kits. But it's all, it's multilingual and it also has pictograms so that people can see and not necessarily have to read the sign and know what it says and what information it's imparting. But so making sure that all of that, all any language needs are met. And then also general kind of supplies needed for a specific population. So for example, if you have a population that has a lot of small children, making sure that we have supplies kind of geared towards that population. Or older adults or whatever, kind of looking at what is the population at this particular site and what needs do they have as sort of a larger group and how can we make sure that we meet those needs. So again, they're kind of a larger picture issue. They're not really working so much with individual clients, although they often will help with kind of troubleshooting around and getting needed items for individual clients. They'll work with health services to do that, but their biggest concern is kind of the larger picture, equity and access. Disaster Health Services, on the other hand, is really focused primarily on individual client needs. And so they work with each of our families, each individual at the shelter, and make sure that they have what they need to thrive. So again, they're looking at medications, at durable medical equipment, things like eyeglasses. They have to be licensed medical professionals that they do have to have a current and unencumbered license, a medical license. They have a certain amount of money per person that they can spend in order to help either replace or repair items that may have been damaged during the evacuation process or during the disaster, if necessary. And so they can use that with their discretion. There's also, if whatever is needed will cost more than that, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just means that we have to get more additional permission, of course. But they have a lot of discretion in what they can use that per person amount of money to help either with physical items. They can also be used for other things like copays if necessary. So they work individually with clients to kind of address whatever their needs are. They also will help the clients work with their insurance and with other local agencies. So they work with public health and local organizations, like, for example, Access Central Coast, and all the different kind of programs locally and groups that provide services to various populations. So, and just a note, you do not have to be staying at a shelter in order to get this kind of help, to get any help, really. You just need to show up and identify what your needs are. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So talk about some of the things that health services helps with and is in charge of. So there are 3 different types of COTS that sort of in general, but also that Red Cross has. And so we have standard COTS, that's the vast majority of our COTS. We have medical COTS and bariatric COTS. And so our standard COTS, again, this is most of our COTS, they hold up to 300 pounds for a single adult user. We have medical COTS that are built really explicitly for a vulnerable population. So they have adjustable heads and feet, and they hold, depending on the brand, between 350 to 500 pounds. It's kind of a 350 to 500 pound single adult user. And then bariatric cots are engineered for higher weight capacities. And so they typically hold up to about 600 pounds. Again, depends on the brand. They do make ones that hold up to 1,000 pounds or more. We have fewer of those locally. Usually we have on a shelter trailer, we'll have 2 medical cots. The rest are standard cots. But we have more medical cots in our storage facilities, in our warehouses, and at our offices. Bariatric cots, we also have usually not any on a shelter trailer, but we have them locally stored. And we can, for all of these, if we need more, we can always get more, usually within 24 to 48 hours, of course, depending on what's happening with the disaster and ability to ship things in. But we have them strategically spaced around the country and around the Central Coast, and we can get more as needed. So, the bottom line, we can and will, of course, accommodate clients with various weights and medical needs. Everybody is welcome. So, if necessary, we'll work with any of our partners to make sure to make appropriate accommodations for our clients to make sure that everybody has somewhere safe to be. We will never turn somebody away without giving them, without having a place for them to go. If we need to, if we can't, we can do things like we can borrow medical beds. We can set up if that's necessary for medical reasons, we can set up a private room for somebody. And if absolutely necessary, we can also put people up in a hotel if we really cannot accommodate them for some reason at the shelter. But our goal is to accommodate everybody at our shelter. And we work with all of our different resources to make that happen. So other things that Disaster Health Services does or do, they help replace or again repair if necessary durable medical equipment, so things that you are normally using, your walkers, canes, wheelchairs, other mobility devices. They may tap into disaster disability integration in order to help procure some of these, especially the more kind of expensive or fixing the more difficult or more expensive items. DDI has more resources and more kind of connections to making that happen. So they may work with DDI to help, especially with larger or difficult to replace and more expensive items. They'll also help make sure that if you are on oxygen, make sure that you have everything you need. They'll keep an eye on it and work with you to ensure that you don't run out of oxygen. They also are going to be making sure that we have accessibility equipment needed for the shelter and maybe working with disability integration to get all of these items. But, if we need toilet risers to raise the toilet seats, shower chairs, portable toilets, whatever we need that individuals at the shelter might need for accessibility. And again, medications, they can help replace or refill as needed. So if you're at the shelter for a while and you run out of your medication, they can help you get a refill. If you have to evacuate and you aren't able to bring your medications with you, one of the things they ask when people are registering at the shelter is, do you have any needs in the next few hours and then in the next 24 hours so that we can look ahead and try to make sure that we are getting things. That includes things like medications, identifying them ahead of time so we can work to get those so that you are not unable to take your medication when you're supposed to take it. So you do need to have a current prescription in order for us to help you replace or refill a prescription. And again, it's really, really helpful if you bring information about your prescribing doctor and your pharmacy so that health services on your behalf can contact that pharmacy and that doctor if necessary to make sure that we can get that refill. But again, they have that financial ability to pay or help pay for those co-pays and to get you that medication. And same with things like eyeglasses and hearing aids. Hearing aids are more complicated and more difficult, but eyeglasses is something that health services does very frequently. Helps our clients replace glasses that were lost in a disaster. Either if they're evacuated, they forgot their glasses or dropped them and broke them, or if they have, for example, like a house fire or something, a small disaster. We have what's called disaster action team, people who respond to smaller disasters like that. They're on call 24/7, 365. And that's one of the things that we do as well. We provide health services support, and they often will help in those cases replace medications and eyeglasses. Those most common two things that we help our clients with. We also have sensory kits, jumping back to the top here. If we have, one or two clients who indicate that would be a useful thing for them, we can just kind of procure that for them individually. If there's a lot of people at the shelter who seem to either request something like that or are there a population that might benefit from that? Disability integration can also request those and procure them in bulk. So it's a bag with a lightly weighted blanket. It has noise canceling headphones, and a squeeze ball. It's a nice little kind of just kit. The lightly weighted blanket, they're 6 pounds. So because a weighted blanket should be no more than 10% of your body weight. And so we can give these to anybody, including children who are at least 60 pounds or more. So they're kind of almost universal. And they're just some items that help handle, a shelter is a stressful place. It's a stressful situation. It is a disaster. People are worried about their homes. You're living in a stormatory situation with a bunch of other people that you don't know. So a lot of people benefit from having things like, the squeeze ball, the noise canceling headphones, the slightly weighted blanket for comfort. Um, and if there's any other sensory items that would be helpful, if health services is made aware, they can also purchase or request those items, either for individual clients, or again, we can work with disability integration to request them in bulk, for everybody at the shelter if that's an identified need. And then I want to talk very briefly about transportation, because Red Cross does not provide transportation directly. We don't drive our clients anywhere, but we do work with our partners. We will advocate on behalf of our clients and request transportation support from our partners, in particular from our government partners, but also local organizations that provide transportation. So we will help make that happen. We will not be the ones driving you, but we will definitely work with our partners to make sure that you are able to get where you need to be. And then just quickly, disability integration, I said, is more kind of the larger picture, but they do work with health services. They're accessing all of the different local and national partnerships. And our larger disasters, kind of medium to large, what we call disability integration liaisons are automatically deployed. But on smaller disasters, they also will support remotely or health services, whether work with somebody or they also are cross-trained. So they will be available to support any disability related needs as well. And so they can help, like I mentioned, with larger, more expensive or more difficult to get items, or either replacing or repairing those items. They can get items that are needed to make a space more accessible in general. And they can also help with making what we would call a calm room or a sensory space for our clients. So they can request in bulk things like the sensory kits, blue room kits, various fidget toys or other sensory items, things like coloring books and puzzles and games. They can request kind of diffused lighting or soft lighting, so that you don't have the glaring overhead lights in a specific, whatever this calm room is. White noise machines are helpful, so they can kind of create a space that helps with sort of the overwhelm that a lot of people experience, or that some people experience at an evacuation shelter. But overall, they work together, and they really share one goal, one kind of overarching goal, which is to support our clients with what they need in order to be able to maintain their level of independence, the level of independence that they had before the disaster. We want people to be able to continue to take care of themselves, to live independently to the best extent possible. Our goal is not to make people dependent on us, because when the disaster is over, they're going to be transitioning to another living situation, whether that's being able to go back home, ideally, or if necessary, going to kind of a longer term, more stable living situation than a disaster evacuation shelter. So we want people to be able to maintain their level of independence, so that it makes it much easier for that transition to the next living situation. And just a quick reminder, and going back to this, you do not need to be staying to be registered at a Red Cross shelter in order to get help. You do need to identify yourself. So it's easiest way is to come to a shelter and say, hey, I need help with my medications. I'm staying at my sister's house, but I had to evacuate and I couldn't grab my meds. Can you help me? Or if you want just information or emotional support, we also have disaster mental health and disaster spiritual care workers, both who are trained and licensed. At least the mental health folks are licensed, and it's very specific group of folks who are able to do spiritual care, who have certain training and experience, and so they're a great source of emotional support If you just need somebody to listen as you kind of talk through your stressors and what's happening with a disaster or your life in general. You can show up at a shelter to eat. We'll give you all the snacks and water and feed you 3 meals a day, at least 2 of them hot. So you don't ever need to be registered, to be staying in the dormitory at a Red Cross shelter in order to get help. You can come to the shelter and just ask for support. Let them know what your needs are, what support you need, and they will be happy to assist you with that. So here's my contact information if you have any questions. I will say I have both my information at the top here, my email address, but also I would urge you to reach out if you have questions about kind of local things in the Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo area. Jessica Hodge is your Community Disaster Program Manager, or what we call CDPM. She covers both Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties, and she is fantastic. So I highly, highly recommend you reach out to her. Her email address is here, jessica.hodge@redcross.org. And she's a great resource for specifically the Central Coast region. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk to you today.
Vance is the Chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. He leads California's nationally recognized efforts to integrate access and functional needs into emergency management before, during, and after disasters. He's built a career at the intersection of public service, emergency management, and advocacy. Diagnosed with muscular dystrophy as a child, Vance is a power wheelchair user. Take it away, Vance. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks very much. Glad to be here, everybody. So, yeah, I just really want to build on, such a great presentation. Thanks very much. Already we've heard a lot of great things from Bradlee. But I really want to just touch and piggyback on a few things. Right. So, first off, yes, anytime there's a disaster of any type, it's people with access and functional needs, right? So older adults, people with disabilities, anybody that's going to require perhaps additional support or services in order to be safe, secure, healthy, and independent before, during, and after that event. These are the individuals that get hit the hardest. And it's not just during major events, right? Like Hurricane Katrina, we always point to that. It was during Hurricane Katrina we watched 70% of everybody who perished had an access or functional need. But it's in small local events as well. And we've got this emergency management system that is a good system, right? But it's a system that was designed and developed by people who could walk and run and see and hear. And as well-intentioned as they were, we're talking about people who run towards danger because they want to help. But as well-intentioned as they were, they didn't understand access and functional needs because they typically didn't have lived experience in those areas. So I, for example, use a power wheelchair. And anytime I enter a room, I'm really looking and assessing accessibility. Are there stairs? Is there a ramp? Is there an elevator? Are there things that are going to impede my path of travel? But if you don't use a wheelchair, if you run, hop, or skip into that room, well, chances are you're not going to be looking for the same things that I am. And that's okay. It's not that one is good and the other is bad. It just simply means that we can look at the same thing and see it differently. And when it comes to emergency management, what we have found is that the whole community, the entire community, does better when we have people with lived experiences at the planning table. And so at Cal OES, we're fortunate because the governor leaned forward and said, we need to create an Office of Access and Functional Needs. We're the only state in the country where we've got a gubernatorially appointed senior level executive that's responsible for serving as tip of the spear on this mission to make sure that emergency management works for everybody. And so it's no surprise that California leads the nation in inclusive planning. And yes, we work with independent living centers. We work with regional centers. We work with a variety of community-based organizations, always with the understanding that we really do best when we plan with people instead of planning for people. Now, there's a few things here. Government needs to stretch, right? We need to do more. We need to do more when it comes to inclusive communication, when it comes to the way we evacuate, when it comes to sheltering or response, or recovery, or mitigation, or any of these efforts. And as our risk and threat landscape changes, we're changing as well in ways that ensure that we reduce not just human suffering, but ultimately loss of life. And so I'm really grateful for partnerships with your organization, with independent living centers, and with others, because you help us get where we need to go. One of the other things we see is that there's a lot individuals can do, really not just to further a culture of preparedness, but to promote their own health, safety, and security. Bradlee was saying, hey, you got a plan so nobody's coming for you. And that's true. Now, we do make plans within the community when it comes to things like our diagnostic health, right? We're good about maintaining hygiene. We're good about physical therapy. We're good about our diets and our medicine. But are we doing enough when it comes to promoting our safety and security against everyday life? I think what we have to ask for, or ask ourselves, is simple questions. What considerations do I need to plan for to be safe if there's a disaster? And what you find is that there are basic things that we can all do to help on that front. So Bradlee was talking about evacuation, and we should all be able to think of 5 people that we can go to, 5 people that we can call that can help us get out if we need to. And I think about my own list of 5. My wife is on there. We're pretty great, so she's going to help. My mom lives close. She's on that list. We had 9 good months together in the womb, so we're pretty tight. I've got a neighbor on there, a friend from church, colleague from work. And the idea is that I can't expect that all these people are going to be available 24/7. But the aim, the hope is to ensure that at least one of them is going to be available to help. Right? They're going to know my needs. They're going to be able to support me. So we can all take the time to think about that. We also need to sign up for emergency alerts. If you go to calalerts.org, you can sign up for a variety of emergency alerts. We had an earthquake this morning. If you don't have the Shake Alert app, then you didn't receive advance notification that it was coming. If we don't sign up for emergency alerts, we won't know what's happening, how to prepare, or what specific actions we should take in order to maintain our safety. Take care of not just ourselves, but our families. We're talking about go bags. Yeah, you want a flashlight, you want a radio, you want extra batteries, and you want that cash in small denominations. These are standard items. But if you've got an access or functional need, then yeah, you're going to need your prescription meds. You're going to need the medically relevant phone numbers for your doctors. You're going to need a copy of your health insurance or an ID card. And of course, you're going to need your durable medical equipment. If you evacuate without your walker, your cane, your BiPAP, a sliding board, you're going to struggle when you get where you're going. And so we have to take ownership over these things. There are two common things that are not taken to shelters. One, people forget their wheelchair chargers. That's really easy to fix. And two, people forget their meds. And we're good about providing meds. Let me tell you where we run up against a challenge. When somebody says, and I've seen this a million times, I forgot my heart medicine. And they go, okay, what do you take? Well, I take an orange pill, and I take a purple pill. I don't know their name. One's a circle, and one's more oblong. Okay, well, who are your doctors? Well, that information's on my cell phone. Where's that? I left it at home. And so it becomes really tricky then to provide that level of support. So there's things that we can do that further our preparedness that apply to every scenario. And that's important because when we're talking about climate change, we're not just talking about floods. We're talking about extreme heat. We're talking about climate that really advances wildfires. We're talking about storms. We're talking about cold events. And so these preparedness steps, they help us regardless of which of those events we're dealing with, including things like power outages. So I think what I'd leave with you is on the government side, we're working to stretch. As community-based organizations, these type of webinars help further culture preparedness. And as individuals with access and functional needs, there are things that we can do that help us to maintain health and safety. And when we all do those things, we as communities ascend. So thanks for the opportunity to be here, and I'll turn the time back over.
Thank you so much, Vance. I'm going to ask if there are any questions for Vance, but I did have one. I was interested in knowing a bit more, like I love that you talked about sort of the accessibility of shelters and what kinds of things, like adding on to what Bradlee had said, what kinds of things people should be bringing with them when they come into the shelters. But I'm curious about, like, if I'm living in one particular area and I do need to be evacuated, how would I find out if there are specific shelters that are accessible? Like if I'm a wheelchair user, that would be accessible to me with accessible restrooms and access. Is there some way that that's part of what emergency management services are ensuring of all shelters, or are there specific ones that I would want to find out so that I could access those if I needed to?
Yeah, great question. So a few things. One is sign up for emergency alerts, right? Because what will happen is you'll get an alert that says, hey, there's a wildfire. So a few things. One is sign up for emergency alerts, right? Because what will happen is you'll get an alert that says, hey, there's a wildfire. There's an evacuation warning in place. When that happens, if you've got an access or functional need, you've got to act and move forward as if it's an evacuation order, because it takes more time. It takes time to call somebody in your five. It takes time to pack up your stuff. It takes time to arrange transportation. So by the time the order comes through, then they say you got to go. That's too late. So sign up for those alerts. In terms, remember the second part of your question? Oh, which shelter to go to?
Yeah. So if there's ways to
Yeah.
find out if
So,
there's
so the
certain
way that we've set this up is as follows. All jurisdictionally supported shelters are designed to be inclusive. So let me break this down. Sometimes you get like a local church and they want to do good things. And so they open their doors. They say, hey, we're a shelter. That's great. We appreciate that. But what we would say is, don't go to that one. Go to the one that's sponsored by the city or the county, because those are going to be supported with accessible resources. Those are going to be facilities that and buildings that they've done accessibility checks. Those are going to be plugged into the pipeline to get accessible cots, specialized dietary considerations, wraparound services. You can access that information through the Cal OES Access and Functional Needs web map, which is a link on our website. You can access those through your local emergency management agency. You can typically call 211 and find that out as well. But yeah, we believe in integrated shelter and environments. So any shelter that's sponsored by the jurisdiction will have accessible resources.
Great, thank you. Can you remind us again how we would find that information about signing up for those alerts?
CalAlerts.org.
Perfect, thank you. I had one other question come up that was about service animals and ESAs. So I would assume that service dogs are allowed into the shelters. Are emotional support animals, or are they not?
So yes, legally, all service animals are allowed into shelters. They're allowed to ask two questions. One, is this animal required due to disability? And two, what service are they trained to perform? They're not allowed to make the animal perform that service. But yeah, service animals are allowed in shelters. Now, in California, emotional support animals, there's some questions about that. California's more lenient on that. then other states, we recognize also that people oftentimes won't evacuate without their pets. And so we do a lot of co-located shelters where there's oftentimes a section for pets and a section for you to be close to that animal. But service animals are allowed.
Thank you. Bradlee, did you want to pop in and also respond to that question?
Yeah, actually, I want to jump back to alerts real quick. I forgot to mention your San Luis Obispo County's alerting website is readyslow.org. That's readyslow.org. That's where you go to sign up for all the alerts for San Luis Obispo County and where you learn about what area your home is in as well. So that's readyslow.org. Just want to throw that in real quick.
Thank you. There was also a question, and this could be for Bradlee or Vance. Relative to rescue by allies, some neighborhoods under evacuation orders have had roadblock restriction access to those only who can show ID as neighborhood residents, supposedly to prevent looting. But Eric is saying in the LA fires, there were horror stories about attempted allies being blocked from rescuing friends or relatives. So, how would this issue be addressed and resolved?
Yeah, that gets to be tough, right? Because if you're trying to go into a burning neighborhood, they're not going to let you in. So again, when you get the warning, you got to act as if it's an alert. I mean, an evacuation order. You can't wait, right? If I say, Jennifer, I need your help right now, then we got to move now, because once it's an order, once neighborhoods are closed off, your ability to access my street is going to be limited. So time. Get those alerts.
Is it ever wise, and again, this could be for Bradlee or Vance, but is it ever wise to, as a person with a disability, when you potentially are in an evacuation area, to leave before the evacuation is made formal? Would it make any sense to do that, not to wait for the evacuation order when things get sort of high stress and chaotic and confusing? Would you ever advise somebody, especially somebody with a disability, to leave before there's an order?
I think it's better to err on the side of caution. I mean,
Right.
if the worst thing that happens is you come back because the order was never put in place, okay, but you're safe. So that's a very proactive move.
Thank you. Bradlee, can you remind us of how somebody would get that go bag from you?
Yeah, absolutely. Give me a call, and if you are interested in having a discussion on disaster preparedness, I have the beginnings of a go bag for you.
Great. And if they didn't catch your number, they can look up Access Central Coast. And I saw you listed as a staff member there, so they could just email you or contact you that way, right?
Yep, perfect. Email, call, any of the above work great.
Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate your participation and the questions that you did have. Feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions. And John, as you said, this will be available for people to view and share. Is that correct?
Yes, it will be available to share. And I want to thank you for moderating. I want to thank the speakers for excellent presentations, for a pitch hitter who due to technical difficulties, but appreciate being able to get the information out. Uh, all our other webinars are available at slowclimatecoalition.org. And our next webinar will be in July it'll be about climate disinformation. But again, I really want a big thank you to all the presenters and to you, Jen, for moderating.
Absolutely. Can I mention the other one that I did that is also available through Climate Coalition? Is that right?
Absolutely. Sorry. Yep.
No, that's okay. So there is also a webinar available for people to watch and listen to that's about the United Nations commitment to supporting people with disabilities during climate change. And so there's a webinar that I put together that talks about the initial United Nations commitment to it, and then there's a more recent 2024-25 evaluation of how countries were doing in meeting those expectations for planning for climate change supports for people with disabilities. So that's also available through the Climate Coalition.
Yes, and you'll find it under a section called Educational Spotlight.
And it's the San Luis Obispo Climate Coalition
.org.
.org, and then it's under that spotlight that John mentioned. We thank you all for being here and appreciate your participation.